Welcome to Pages from History. Today we're traveling back 4,000 years to uncover a mystery that still haunts the Mediterranean. Imagine a civilization so advanced it had flush toilets, four-story buildings, and vibrant frescoes, while most of Europe lived in mud huts. Now imagine that entire civilization vanishing almost overnight. No goodbye, no warning, just ruins and silence. This should have been impossible, yet it happened. The Minoans were Europe's first great civilization, and their sudden disappearance remains one of history's most chilling mysteries. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. First, the Golden Age of Knossos. The year is 1900 before the Common Era. The Mediterranean sun blazes down on the island of Crete, the largest island in the Greek archipelago. But this is not the Greece you know from history books. Athens doesn't exist yet. Sparta is just a collection of primitive villages. The great heroes of Troy are still centuries away from being born. Yet here on Crete, something extraordinary is happening. A civilization is rising that will define an entire age. Picture yourself standing at the harbor of Knossos, the beating heart of Minoan power. Ships crowd the docks, their painted sails bright against the azure sea. Egyptian merchants unload precious goods, ivory from Africa, exotic spices from the east. Minoan sailors laugh and shout in a language lost to time, their bronzed skin glistening with sweat as they carry amphorae filled with olive oil and wine. The air smells of salt, cedar wood, and the sweet perfume worn by the elegantly dressed men and women who oversee the trade. Walk with me through the streets leading up to the palace. The roads are paved, not with crude stones, but with carefully fitted slabs that have drainage channels running beneath them. Yes, drainage channels. While other civilizations in Europe are still figuring out basic shelter, the Minoans have engineered sophisticated water management systems. Every major building connects to an underground network of terracotta pipes that bring fresh water in and carry waste away. The concept of indoor plumbing will disappear from Europe after the Minoans' fall and won't return for over 3,000 years. The houses lining these streets rise 2, 3, even 4 stories high. Their walls are painted in vibrant reds, yellows, and blues. Windows with wooden shutters look down on the street. On every corner, small shrines display offerings to the gods, fresh flowers and clay figurines of bare-breasted goddesses with snakes coiled around their arms. The Minoans worship the divine feminine, and it shows in every aspect of their society. A group of women passes by, and their appearance would shock anyone familiar with other ancient cultures. Their dresses are elaborate, with tight bodices that leave their breasts exposed and long flowing skirts decorated with intricate patterns. Their faces are painted with cosmetics, their lips bright red, their eyes lined with kohl. They wear their hair in elaborate styles with curls cascading down their backs and gold ornaments glittering in the sunlight. But what's truly remarkable is how they move through the city with complete freedom. They're not veiled, they're not chaperoned. They walk beside men as equals, entering shops, conducting business, participating in religious ceremonies. Now we approach the palace itself, and your breath catches in your throat. The Palace of Knossos is unlike anything else in the ancient world. It sprawls across 6 acres, a massive complex of over 1,000 rooms, connected by corridors, staircases, and courtyards. The walls rise 4 stories high in places, supported by distinctive red columns that taper downward instead of upward like Greek columns will later do. The entire structure seems to pulse with life and color. The main entrance leads through a processional corridor. The walls on either side are covered with frescoes so vivid they seem to move in the torchlight. Here's a procession of young people carrying offerings, their profiles painted in the distinctive Minoan style, with one eye shown frontally even though the face is in profile. There's a blue monkey reaching for flowers. Over there, a griffin with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle guards a sacred space. And everywhere, bulls, bulls charging, bulls leaping, bulls being grasped by fearless young athletes. Can you imagine the wealth and power required to build such a place? The palace complex includes massive storage rooms filled floor to ceiling with giant clay jars called pithoi. Each jar stands taller than a man and can hold hundreds of gallons of olive oil, wine, or grain. There are hundreds of these jars, representing the accumulated wealth of an entire civilization. The Minoans control the sea trade of the eastern Mediterranean, and this palace is the center of their economic power. But what happened next would change everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations. The palace isn't just a warehouse or a fortress. It's a living, breathing center of culture and administration. In the Western Wing, scribes work in small offices, making marks on clay tablets using a script we call Linear A. Despite decades of effort, modern scholars still cannot fully decipher this writing system. The tablets record transactions, inventories, religious dedications, but their full meaning remains locked in the past. The Minoans took their language to the grave with them. In the central courtyard, preparation begins for one of the most important ceremonies in Minoan culture. Workers spread fresh sand across the paving stones. Artists touch up the frescoes on the surrounding walls. Musicians tune their instruments, strange lyres and drums that will create rhythms lost for millennia. The air fills with anticipation because today the bull dancers will perform. The bull dancing ceremony is unlike anything else in the ancient world. It's not a brutal fight like the Roman games will be. It's not a simple sacrifice. It's an athletic and religious performance that combines the grace of gymnastics with the danger of facing a charging bull. Young men and women, their bodies lithe and trained from years of practice, will attempt to grab the horns of a bull and flip over its back in a perfect arc. One mistake means death. One moment of hesitation means being gored by horns or trampled under hooves. Why do they do this? What drives these young people to risk their lives in such a spectacular way? The answer lies deep in Minoan religious belief. The bull represents the power of nature, the wild force of the earth itself. By mastering the bull, by working with its energy rather than against it, the dancers demonstrate humanity's ability to live in harmony with the natural world. It's a philosophy that runs through every aspect of Minoan culture. The palace also houses workshops where artisans create objects of stunning beauty. In one room, a goldsmith carefully hammers gold leaf into the shape of a bee, creating jewelry so delicate it seems impossible it could survive 4,000 years, yet it will. In another workshop, a potter shapes clay into an octopus vase, the tentacles of the sea creature wrapping around the vessel in a design that captures the fluid movement of the ocean itself. These aren't just craftsmen. They're artists working at a level that won't be matched again until the classical Greek period, 1,000 years later. The religious life of the Minoans centers on female deities and natural sacred spaces. Deep in the palace, in the most secret chambers, priestesses perform rituals we can only guess at. They handle sacred snakes, symbols of the earth's regenerative power. They pour libations of honey and wine into offering tables carved with sacred symbols. They commune with goddesses whose names we'll never know, speaking prayers in a language that died with their civilization. Outside the palace walls, in the countryside surrounding Knossos, life follows rhythms as old as agriculture itself. Farmers tend olive groves and vineyards on terraced hillsides. Shepherds guide flocks of sheep and goats through rocky pastures. Fishermen cast their nets into the wine-dark sea, bringing in catches that will feed the growing population. The Minoans have mastered their environment, creating a society of abundance and leisure that allows for the flourishing of art and culture. But do you know what's missing from this picture? What element is notably absent from this seemingly perfect civilization? There are no massive walls, no fortifications, no weapons of war depicted in the art. The palace of Knossos stands open and undefended, a statement of confidence that seems almost arrogant to modern eyes. The Minoans apparently feel so secure in their control of the seas that they see no need for the defensive architecture that dominates every other ancient civilization. Their navy must be so powerful that no enemy would dare approach their shores. Or perhaps their wealth allows them to pay tribute and maintain peace through trade rather than force. This confidence extends to every aspect of Minoan society. While other ancient civilizations build tombs and monuments to glorify their dead kings, the Minoans focus on celebrating life. Their art shows nature, animals, flowers, sea creatures, and beautiful young people engaged in sports and ceremonies. Death is present, but it doesn't dominate their worldview the way it does in Egypt or will in later Greek culture. The Minoans seem to understand something profound about living in the moment, about finding joy in the beauty of the natural world. The society they've created is remarkably egalitarian for its time. Yes, there's a ruling class, priests and priestesses who commune with the gods, administrators who manage the palace complex. But there's no evidence of the brutal hierarchy that characterizes other ancient civilizations. No slaves being whipped to build monuments, no conquered peoples dragged in chains through the streets. The Minoans appear to rule through trade and cultural influence rather than military conquest. Their influence spreads far beyond the shores of Crete. On islands throughout the Cyclades, local rulers adopt Minoan fashions, Minoan art styles, Minoan religious practices. Minoan pottery appears in Egypt, in Anatolia, even as far as the Levant. The distinctive red columns of Minoan architecture begin to appear in buildings across the Mediterranean. It's a cultural empire, spread not through conquest, but through the irresistible appeal of a superior way of life. In the palace workshops, scribes record the incoming tribute and trade goods, copper from Cyprus, tin from distant lands to make bronze, purple dye from Phoenicia, precious stones from Egypt. The wealth flowing into Knossos seems inexhaustible. The civilization appears to be at its absolute peak, strong, prosperous, culturally vibrant, and secure in its dominance of the Mediterranean world. But there are signs, small warnings, that perhaps not everyone notices or chooses to acknowledge. In some of the palace rooms, archaeologists will later find evidence of repairs, of walls rebuilt after earth tremors. Crete sits on a geologically active zone where the African and European tectonic plates grind together. Small earthquakes are common, but the Minoans have learned to build with them using flexible wooden frameworks within their stone walls. They've survived tremors before. They'll survive them again, or so they believe. On a spring morning in the palace throne room, The ruler of Knossos sits on a stone throne, flanked by painted griffins. The throne room is surprisingly modest, not the vast hall of later Greek kings, but an intimate space painted in warm reds and decorated with sacred symbols. Here, decisions are made that affect trade routes spanning thousands of miles. Here, religious ceremonies connect the earthly palace with the divine realm. Here, the heart of Minoan civilization beats strong and steady. Young scribes sit at the ruler's feet, recording decrees on clay tablets in the mysterious Linear A script. Messengers arrive from distant ports, bringing news of successful trading voyages, of new markets opening, of foreign rulers seeking Minoan goods and Minoan expertise. Everything suggests a civilization that will endure for thousands of years, growing stronger and more sophisticated with each passing generation. But what if I told you that within a single lifetime, this throne room will lie in ruins, that the magnificent frescoes will be buried under rubble, that the vast storage jars will shatter and spill their contents onto broken floors, that the very language being written on those clay tablets will be forgotten so completely that even today, with all our technology, we cannot fully understand it? The Minoans stand at the peak of their power, unaware that they're living in the final golden age of their civilization. They don't know that somewhere to the north, on the small volcanic island of Thera, forces are building that will change everything. They can't imagine that their seemingly invincible society is about to face challenges that will test whether their sophisticated culture can survive in a world that's about to become much more violent and chaotic. In the palace quarters where the royal family lives, children play games with painted clay toys. They're being educated in the arts, in administration, in religious mysteries. They're learning to read the sacred scripts, to perform the proper rituals, to maintain the traditions that have made Minoan civilization great. They assume they'll grow up to take their places in this sophisticated society, continuing the work of their parents and grandparents. But these children are among the last generation who will speak the Minoan language as their native tongue. Within their lifetimes, everything they know will change. The world they're born into, with its peace, prosperity, and cultural achievement, will give way to something darker and more brutal. As the sun sets over Knossos, painting the palace walls in shades of gold and crimson, the Minoans gather for evening prayers and celebrations. They pour wine to honor their goddesses. They dance in the courtyards to music that will be lost forever. They live fully in the moment, in the beauty of their created world, unaware that time is running out. The golden age of Knossos is about to end, and when it does, it will happen so suddenly and so completely that future generations will struggle to believe such a civilization ever existed at all. What you're about to discover in the next segment will reveal the strange and mysterious aspects of Minoan religion that both fascinated and terrified the ancient world. Prepare yourself for secrets that have remained hidden for 4,000 years. Second, secrets of the bull dancers. Deep beneath the palace of Knossos, in chambers that most Minoans will never see, the sacred mysteries of the bull cult unfold. These underground rooms, cool and dark even in the height of summer, are where priestesses prepare for the most important ceremonies in Minoan religion. The walls here are painted with symbols that carry meanings lost to us, spirals and double axes and horns of consecration. The air smells of incense, myrrh and frankincense imported from distant lands at great expense. A young woman enters the chamber. She's perhaps 16 years old, chosen from birth for this sacred role. Her body is painted with intricate designs, red and white patterns that follow ancient traditions. Around her waist, she wears a golden belt decorated with bull horns. In her hands, she holds two writhing serpents, sacred creatures that connect the upper world with the underworld below. She shows no fear. She's been training for this moment her entire life. The chief priestess watches her with approval. This girl represents the next generation of religious leadership in Minoan society. She's learned the secret languages, the hidden prayers, the proper ways to handle the sacred objects that channel divine power. She knows things that will die with her when the civilization falls, mysteries that modern archaeologists can only guess at by studying fragmentary evidence. But why snakes? Why this particular symbol that will later become associated with evil in Western culture? To the Minoans, serpents represent transformation and regeneration. They shed their skins and are reborn. They move between the surface world and the dark earth below. They're intermediaries between the human and divine realms. A priestess who can handle venomous snakes without fear demonstrates her special connection to the goddess, her ability to channel dangerous divine power safely. The ceremony that's about to take place connects to something even more dramatic happening above ground. In the great central courtyard of the palace, workers have finished their preparations. The sand has been raked smooth. The painted walls gleam in the afternoon sun. Thousands of spectators crowd onto balconies and staircases overlooking the courtyard. The entire population of Knossos seems to have gathered for this event. A hush falls over the crowd. From a gate at the far end of the courtyard, a massive bull enters. This isn't a domestic animal bred for docility. It's a wild creature, powerful and dangerous, its horns sharp and its eyes rolling with fear and aggression. It paws at the sand, snorting clouds of vapor in the cool morning air. Several handlers with long poles try to guide it toward the center of the courtyard, but the bull resists, its muscles rippling under sleek hide. Then the dancers enter. 3 young people, 2 men and 1 woman, walk into the courtyard with a confidence that borders on arrogance. They're nearly naked, wearing only loincloths and simple jewelry. Their bodies are perfect, trained to peak physical condition through years of rigorous practice. The woman's skin is painted white, according to Minoan artistic convention, while the men's skin is shown as dark red in the frescoes that will preserve this scene for millennia. What happens next seems to defy the laws of physics and common sense. As the bull charges toward them, the lead dancer doesn't run, he doesn't dodge to the side. Instead, he runs directly at the charging animal. At the last possible second, he grasps the bull's horns and uses the animal's own momentum to vault himself up and over its back, completing a perfect flip before landing on his feet behind the creature. The crowd erupts in cheers and prayers. Can you imagine the skill this requires, the split-second timing, the absolute trust in your own abilities? One miscalculation and you're dead, trampled or gored in front of thousands of witnesses. Yet these young people make it look effortless, dancing with death in a performance that's both athletic competition and sacred ritual. The female dancer is next. She approaches the bull with graceful steps, her arms extended. The frescoes that capture this moment show her in mid-leap, horizontal in the air, suspended above the bull's back in a pose that seems to last forever. She lands cleanly and runs to safety while her companions distract the increasingly agitated animal. The ritual continues, each dancer taking turns, each vault more daring than the last. But this ceremony is more than just spectacular entertainment. It's a profound religious statement about humanity's relationship with nature and the divine. The bull represents the raw power of the earth, the untamed forces that could destroy human civilization in an instant. By dancing with the bull, rather than simply killing it, the Minoans demonstrate a philosophy of harmony rather than domination. They're not trying to conquer nature. They're trying to move with it, to find grace and beauty in the dangerous dance of existence. This philosophy extends to every aspect of Minoan religion. Unlike later Greek religion, with its patriarchal sky gods, Minoan worship centers on earth goddesses and natural sacred sites. High in the mountains of Crete, in caves and on windswept peaks, the Minoans establish sanctuaries where priestesses commune with the divine. These aren't elaborate temples. They're natural spaces made sacred by human belief and ritual. At one such mountain sanctuary, accessible only by a difficult climb, offerings accumulate over centuries, clay figurines of worshippers, their arms raised in prayer, bronze weapons dedicated to the goddess, precious jewelry given as thanks for answered prayers. The Minoans believe the goddess dwells in these high places, closer to the sky, where her power flows down to the human world below. The religious calendar follows the agricultural year. Spring festivals celebrate rebirth and renewal, with processions carrying sacred objects through blooming fields. Summer ceremonies give thanks for the ripening crops and ask for protection from drought. Autumn rituals celebrate the harvest with offerings of the finest grains and fruits. Winter rites acknowledge the dying season and pray for the sun's return. Women play the central role in almost all these ceremonies. The frescoes and artifacts consistently show female religious figures, priestesses conducting rituals, goddesses receiving worship. This isn't to say men are excluded from religious life, but the spiritual power in Minoan society flows primarily through women. They're the ones who handle the sacred snakes. They're the ones who enter trance states and speak prophecies. They're the ones who perform the secret rites that maintain the cosmic balance. This prominence of women in religion reflects their status in Minoan society as a whole. Archaeological evidence suggests women in Minoan Crete enjoyed freedoms and rights that wouldn't return to Europe until modern times. They owned property, they conducted business, they participated in sports and public ceremonies. The contrast with later Greek society, where women were largely confined to domestic spaces, could not be more stark. But what if there's a darker side to these beautiful rituals and seemingly enlightened social structures? Some modern scholars studying Minoan remains have found troubling evidence. At a site called Anemospilia, archaeologists discovered the remains of what appears to be a human sacrifice. 3 skeletons were found in a temple that collapsed during an earthquake. One was bound on an altar, another held a ceremonial knife, the third, possibly a priest, lay nearby. The physical evidence suggests these people were in the middle of a human sacrifice when disaster struck. Could the sophisticated, art-loving Minoans really have practiced human sacrifice? The evidence remains controversial. Some argue the scene has been misinterpreted. Others point out that desperate times might have called for desperate measures. If the Minoans were experiencing a series of earthquakes and natural disasters, they might have resorted to the ultimate offering, human life itself, to appease angry gods. There's also the disturbing question of what happened to the bull dancers who failed. Not every leap was successful. Not every dancer survived their training. The Minoans left no written records of what happened to those who died in the ring, but we can imagine the scene. a young body broken on the sand, a bull's horns red with blood, the shocked silence of the crowd. Did they see this as tragedy or as necessary sacrifice? Did they honor the dead dancer or forget them quickly? And what about those young dancers themselves? How were they chosen? Did they volunteer, driven by religious devotion or the promise of glory? Or were they selected, perhaps even compelled, to risk their lives for the entertainment and spiritual benefit of the masses? The smiling faces in the frescoes tell us nothing about the fear these young people must have felt, the nightmares they must have had before each performance. The religious life of the Minoans contains mysteries we may never fully solve. In the palace at Knossos, there's a room that archaeologists call the throne room, but it might have been a space for religious rituals rather than political power. The stone throne, flanked by painted griffins and benches for attendants, faces a sunken area that might have been used for purification rites. Some scholars suggest the ruler of Knossos was as much a religious figure as a political one, a priest-king or perhaps a priest-queen who mediated between the human and divine worlds. The famous labyrinth of Greek mythology, the maze where the Minotaur supposedly dwelled, might be a distorted memory of the palace itself. With its 1,000 rooms, its confusing corridors, its multiple levels connected by staircases, Knossos could certainly seem labyrinthine to an outsider. The myth speaks of 7 youths and 7 maidens sent from Athens to be devoured by the bull-headed monster. Could this be a garbled folk memory of young people sent to Crete for the bull-dancing ceremonies, some of whom never returned home? The Minotaur itself, half man and half bull, represents a fusion that lies at the heart of Minoan religious thought. Humans and animals, civilization and nature, order and chaos. The Minoans seem to have been fascinated by liminal spaces, by creatures and concepts that exist on boundaries between categories. Their art shows griffins, sphinxes, and other hybrid beings. Their religious practices involve transformation and transcendence. In workshops adjacent to the palace, artists create objects that will be used in these mysterious ceremonies. A rhyton, a ritual vessel shaped like a bull's head, is carved from black stone and fitted with golden horns. Wine will be poured from the bull's mouth during ceremonies, symbolically giving life and voice to the sacred animal. An ivory acrobat, frozen in mid-leap, captures the grace and danger of the bull dance. These objects are more than art. They're tools for connecting with the divine, for making abstract spiritual concepts tangible and real. As evening falls over Knossos, the bull dancing ceremony concludes. All 3 dancers have survived, their bodies intact, their reputations enhanced. The bull is led away, whether to be sacrificed or to be retired, we don't know. The crowd disperses, talking excitedly about what they've witnessed. The dancers retire to sacred quarters, where they'll be purified and thanked by the priestesses. Tomorrow they'll train again, preparing for the next performance, knowing that any day could be their last. But beneath the celebration, beneath the religious fervor and the athletic prowess, something is changing. The earth itself is restless. Far to the north, on the island of Thera, a volcano is building toward an eruption that will be one of the most powerful in human history. The Minoans don't know this yet. They can't imagine what's coming. But nature, which they've spent so long trying to harmonize with, is about to demonstrate its ultimate power. In the sacred caves and mountain sanctuaries, priestesses begin to report disturbing omens, animals behaving strangely, unusual weather patterns, dreams filled with fire and darkness. The official response is to intensify the rituals, to make more offerings, to dance more boldly with the bulls. If the gods are angry, surely the solution is more devotion, more spectacular ceremonies, more perfect religious performances. But what if the gods aren't angry at all? What if what's about to happen has nothing to do with divine punishment or human sin? What if the Minoans, despite all their sophistication, despite their beautiful religion and their harmonious philosophy, are simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The sacred snakes handled by the priestesses are among the first to sense the changes. They become agitated, refusing to be held, slithering away to hide in cracks in the walls. The bulls in the palace pens below start to bellow at odd hours, their eyes rolling white with fear. Birds abandon their nests and fly in confused circles. The natural world is trying to send a warning, but the Minoans, for all their attunement to nature, cannot read these signs clearly enough. In the throne room, the ruler of Knossos consults with advisors about recent tremors. They've been minor so far, nothing the palace hasn't weathered before. The flexible wooden frameworks in the walls have done their job, allowing the building to sway without collapsing. Repairs are made quickly and efficiently. Life goes on. Trade continues. The next bull dancing ceremony is scheduled. The religious calendar marches forward. No one realizes that time is running out. The golden age that seemed like it would last forever is about to end in fire and ash and tidal waves that will reshape the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The secrets of the bull dancers, the mysteries of the snake priestesses, the beautiful philosophy of harmony with nature, all of it is about to be tested in ways the Minoans never imagined possible. What happens next will determine whether this sophisticated civilization can survive, or whether it will join the ranks of lost worlds that exist only in archaeology and myth. The answer, as you're about to discover, is more tragic and more mysterious than anyone could have predicted. Third, the day everything ended. The island of Thera lies 70 miles north of Crete, a beautiful dot in the Aegean Sea. In the 17th century, before the Common Era, it's a thriving Minoan colony, home to thousands of people who live in sophisticated towns with multi-story buildings, elaborate frescoes, and all the amenities of Minoan civilization. The main settlement, which we call Akrotiri today, is a miniature version of Knossos itself, with drainage systems, imported luxuries, and vivid artwork depicting ships, monkeys, and swallows in flight. But Thera holds a terrible secret. The island itself is the rim of a massive volcanic caldera, a sleeping giant that has erupted catastrophically before and will erupt again. Beneath the peaceful surface, in chambers miles below the seafloor, magma has been accumulating for centuries. Pressure builds slowly, inexorably, as molten rock forces its way upward through cracks in the Earth's crust. The first signs are easy to dismiss. Small earthquakes rattle the island, no more severe than the tremors Crete experiences regularly. A few fishing boats report strange bubbling in the water offshore. Some people notice a sulfurous smell in the air near the coast. But these warnings are subtle, and the Minoans have no scientific framework for understanding what they mean. They make offerings to the goddesses and continue with their lives. Then one morning the earthquakes intensify. Buildings in Akrotiri begin to crack. Walls that have stood for generations suddenly develop fissures. The tremors come in waves, each one stronger than the last. The people of Thera aren't fools. They recognize danger when they see it. Families begin to gather their most precious possessions. Ships are loaded with valuables. the population starts to evacuate, sailing south toward Crete or dispersing to other islands. This evacuation saves thousands of lives. When archaeologists excavate Akrotiri in the 20th century, they'll find virtually no human remains, no bodies caught in the disaster. The Minoans managed to get their people out in time, but they couldn't save their civilization from what came next. The eruption, when it finally comes, is beyond anything in human experience. The explosion is 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa, 40 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens. The sound can be heard 3,000 miles away. The top of the mountain simply disintegrates, blown into the atmosphere in a column of ash and rock that rises 20 miles into the sky. Millions of tons of volcanic material are ejected in a matter of hours. Can you imagine standing on Crete and watching this happen? 70 miles away, you see the sky turn black. A towering cloud rises on the northern horizon, glowing red from within with the fires of the earth itself. Thunder rolls continuously, but it's not from any storm. It's the sound of the world breaking apart. Ash begins to fall like dark snow, coating everything in a grey blanket that suffocates crops and fouls water supplies. But the explosion is only the beginning. When that much material is removed from beneath the volcano, the mountain collapses into the void. The entire center of Thera falls into the sea, displacing billions of tons of water. Tsunami waves radiate outward in all directions, moving at hundreds of miles per hour across the open ocean. The waves reach Crete in less than an hour. They're not like normal waves that crash and recede. These are walls of water 30 feet high, perhaps higher, that simply sweep inland and keep going. Coastal settlements are obliterated instantly. Ships are picked up and carried miles inland. The harbors that made Minoan trade dominance possible are destroyed in minutes. Thousands of people who survived the earthquakes and the ashfall die in the floods. At Knossos, far enough inland to escape the worst of the tsunami, the people watch in horror as their world transforms. The palace stands, but the aftershocks continue for days, weeks, months. Each tremor brings down more buildings, cracks more walls, destroys more infrastructure. The ash cloud has blocked out the sun, turning day into twilight. Crops fail. Water sources become contaminated. The carefully maintained olive groves and vineyards are buried under volcanic debris. The immediate physical destruction is catastrophic, but the economic and political consequences might be even worse. The Minoan thalassocracy, their sea-based empire, depends on naval superiority and maritime trade. In a single day, their fleet has been largely destroyed. The harbors they controlled are ruined. Trade routes that took generations to establish are severed. Colonies and trading partners across the Mediterranean suddenly find themselves cut off from the Minoan heartland. Into this power vacuum, others rush. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans have been watching Minoan prosperity with envy for centuries. They've adopted Minoan art, Minoan architecture, Minoan religion, but they've also been building something the Minoans neglected: military power, fortified citadels, warrior aristocracies, the tools of conquest rather than trade. The Mycenaeans see their opportunity. Within a generation of the Thera eruption, they're raiding Crete. At first, these might be opportunistic attacks, pirates testing the defenses of a weakened civilization. But as Minoan weakness becomes apparent, the raids intensify. Archaeological evidence shows that many Minoan sites are burned during this period. Knossos itself shows signs of violent destruction, though the timeline is debated by scholars. But here's where the mystery deepens. Was it conquest or collapse? Did the Mycenaeans invade and destroy Minoan civilization, or did they simply move into the ruins of a society that had already fallen apart? The evidence is frustratingly ambiguous. Some sites show clear signs of warfare, others appear to have been peacefully abandoned. Some Minoan cultural practices continue under Mycenaean rule, others disappear completely. What we know for certain is that the language changes. The Mycenaeans bring their own writing system, Linear B, which we can read because it's an early form of Greek. The documents from this period are still administrative records, inventories, and tax receipts, but now they're in Greek instead of the unknown Minoan language. The old Linear A script disappears. With it, the last direct connection to Minoan culture is severed. The palace at Knossos continues to be occupied, but it's different now. The sophisticated plumbing systems fall into disrepair. The elaborate frescoes are damaged and not restored with the same care. The religious practices change. The bull dancing ceremonies cease. The snake priestesses disappear from the archaeological record. What was once the center of a brilliant civilization becomes just another provincial palace in the Mycenaean world. Why couldn't the Minoans recover? Other civilizations have survived natural disasters and rebuilt. The Romans endured the eruption of Vesuvius. The Japanese have weathered countless earthquakes and tsunamis. What made the Minoans different? Perhaps it was the perfect storm of catastrophes. The volcanic eruption damaged their infrastructure. The tsunamis destroyed their fleet. The ashfall ruined their agriculture. The earthquakes continued for years, preventing effective rebuilding. And in their moment of weakness, aggressive neighbors seized the opportunity to dominate them. Any one of these challenges might have been survivable. All of them together proved fatal. Or perhaps the vulnerability was built into their success. The Minoans had created a civilization based on peace, trade, and cultural sophistication. They'd neglected military defense, trusting in their naval power and their trading relationships to keep them safe. When those advantages disappeared overnight, they had no plan B. They had no walls to retreat behind, no warrior class to defend them, no tradition of military resistance. There's another possibility that's even more unsettling. What if the disaster broke something psychological in Minoan culture? Their entire worldview was based on harmony with nature, on the belief that proper religious observances and respect for the earth would maintain cosmic balance. Then nature betrayed them in the most spectacular way possible. The earth itself rose up and destroyed their cities. The sea they'd mastered turned against them. How do you maintain faith in a religious system when the gods seem to have abandoned you so completely? In the years following the disaster, we can imagine the conversations in the damaged halls of Knossos. The old priestesses still remember the glory days. They try to maintain the rituals, to keep the traditions alive. But the young people have seen those traditions fail to protect them. The bulls still dance, but the performances are hollow echoes of what they once were. The sacred snakes are handled, but everyone wonders if the goddesses are even listening anymore. The scribes still write in Linear A, carefully recording information in a language that's dying even as they write it. Each clay tablet they create might be one of the last documents in Minoan. The younger scribes are already learning Linear B, the Greek script that's becoming the language of power and administration. Within a generation, no one will be able to read what these scribes are writing. The Minoan language will become a mystery, locked in clay tablets that won't be deciphered for 4,000 years. Do you know what the saddest part is? The Minoans themselves probably didn't realize they were watching their civilization die. Each small change seemed reasonable at the time, adopting some Mycenaean practices for trade purposes, allowing Greek-speaking administrators to help rebuild the economy, letting traditional ceremonies lapse because resources were needed elsewhere. No single decision doomed them, but the accumulation of all these small surrenders meant that within a few generations, Minoan culture had been absorbed and diluted until it was barely recognizable. By 1500 before the Common Era, less than a century after the Thera eruption, the great age of Minoan civilization is over. Knossos still exists, but it's now just one palace among many in the Mycenaean world. The unique Minoan identity, the philosophy that produced such beautiful art and sophisticated culture, has been lost. The people might still live, their descendants scattered across Crete and the islands, but the civilization that made them special is gone. The final destruction of Knossos comes around 1400 before the Common Era. Fire sweeps through the palace complex, reducing the ancient center of Minoan power to ruins. Whether this fire is accidental, the result of an earthquake, or deliberate destruction by conquerors, we cannot say for certain. The palace is never rebuilt. The site is eventually abandoned completely. The greatest architectural achievement of Bronze Age Europe becomes a ruin, slowly buried under debris and soil. For thousands of years, the Minoans are forgotten. The Greeks remember them only dimly in myths about King Minos and the labyrinth, stories that mix fragments of truth with pure fantasy. The Romans never hear of them at all. Medieval Europeans walking past the ruins of Knossos have no idea what they're looking at. The sophisticated civilization that once thrived there has vanished so completely that it might as well have never existed. It's not until 1900 of the Common Era that British archaeologist Arthur Evans begins excavations at Knossos and rediscovers the Minoan world. What he finds astonishes the scholarly world. A civilization that had flush toilets 3,000 years before most of Europe, art of stunning beauty and sophistication, evidence of a society where women held unprecedented power and status, a culture that seemed to value beauty, nature, and harmony over warfare and conquest. But Evans also makes controversial decisions. He reconstructs large portions of the palace based on his interpretations, sometimes guessing at what the original appearance might have been. He names the civilization after the mythical king Minos. He projects his own Victorian assumptions onto Minoan culture. Modern archaeologists debate how much of what we think we know about the Minoans reflects their reality versus Evans's imagination. The mysteries remain. We still cannot fully read Linear A. We don't know what the Minoans called themselves. We can only speculate about the details of their religious beliefs. We don't know if the bull dancing was voluntary or compulsory. We can't say with certainty whether the Thera eruption directly caused Minoan collapse or merely accelerated existing decline. What we do know is that Europe's first great civilization rose, flourished, and fell in the space of a few centuries. They created something remarkable, a society that in many ways was more advanced and humane than what would follow for the next 3,000 years. They proved that civilization could be built on trade and culture rather than conquest and domination. They showed that women could be powerful religious and political figures. They demonstrated that art and beauty could be as important as military might. And then they vanished, leaving behind only ruins, mysterious writings, and beautiful frescoes that capture a world we can never fully understand. The Minoans became a ghost, haunting the margins of Greek mythology, waiting thousands of years to be rediscovered and appreciated. Their story reminds us that even the most sophisticated civilizations are fragile, that nature doesn't care about human achievement, that a single disaster can erase centuries of cultural development. But their story also reminds us that something beautiful and worthwhile doesn't stop being valuable just because it didn't last forever. The Minoans lived their truth. They created art that moves us 4,000 years later. They built a society based on principles that still seem advanced by modern standards. For a few brief centuries, on an island in the Mediterranean, they showed humanity a different way of being. And even though their civilization fell, even though their language died, even though their cities crumbled into dust, they left something behind that survives. The memory of what's possible, the proof that we can do better, the hope that civilization can be more than just power and conquest. The Minoans are gone, but they're not forgotten, not anymore. Every tourist who walks through the reconstructed halls of Knossos, every student who studies their art, every archaeologist who carefully excavates their sites, keeps their memory alive. The civilization that vanished has found a kind of immortality after all. And so today, we discovered that Europe's first civilization rose to incredible heights, only to vanish in fire and ash, leaving behind mysteries we're still trying to solve. Personally, I believe the Minoans showed us that civilization can be built on beauty and harmony rather than conquest, but even the most sophisticated society can't survive when nature and history conspire against it. What do you think? Could the Minoans have survived if they'd built walls and armies like other civilizations? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through time, hit the like button and subscribe to Pages from History. Turn on notifications for more epic historical content. Thank you for watching. See you in the next chapter of history.